Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. I am incredibly excited for today's episode with Kaleigh DeHart. She is the PR manager at Bath & Body Works. Welcome, Kaleigh.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Of course. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Kaleigh's whole career story is very PR centric. And so this is a great episode if you're maybe deciding between marketing and PR, or if you want to go in-house or agency. And so I'm eager to go dive in, but I want to first have you introduce yourself. So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So as you said, very PR centric. I studied PR, and that's a very niche kind of degree to get. At least at my school, I went to Florida State in Florida, and they only had about 30 people in my class. So all my classes are super small, and it was very focused content, which I loved. But ironically, I didn't know that I wanted to do PR from the start. I just knew that I loved writing. I loved connecting with people, relationship building. And I originally actually thought I wanted to do journalism and be a storyteller from that perspective. But then when I went to college, I realized I needed to pick a degree, and I was kind of running out of time. And I met someone who was doing PR and went to coffee with them and was okay, what you do is really cool. I think it might be a good fit for me. And I kind of just jumped in. I was I need to get my degree. I'm just going to take these classes and see where it takes me. And I'm happy to say that I, have really landed where I wanted to be after getting that degree. And I started kind of in an agency position, but now at Bath & Body Works, which is truly amazing. I'm just really excited that I can work for such a big company that does great things with fragrance and, bringing happiness to people.
That's amazing. I think a lot of people can relate to knowing that maybe they like communication. I feel like most people just go a communication major route, or they do something in marketing. And so I think it's interesting to see that if that's a passion of yours, that can translate to the PR industry as well. Before we dive into your PR career journey, can you define for us just what is public relations?
Yeah, it's funny too. I feel like I didn't really know what it was even when I chose it as my major. It's I went to coffee, I learned this person's kind of day to day, but I didn't really know but what is PR? And I think it's because everyone defines it differently. Even at my agency, we had so many different clients, and they would come to us with their own definitions of what they thought we would do. And we would have to kind of be the expert to come back to them with what services we really offered or how to think about what PR is. But at the highest level, it's just creating a positive brand image, reputation, or even just relationship with the public. And it's usually traditionally through earned media, which is completely unpaid. So magazines, newspapers, broadcasts, even the national morning TV shows you might watch, Good Morning America that you wake up to, getting spots on that without having to pay for it, which really is just through creative storytelling and capturing, media attention. And it's kind of I get to work with journalists, which is what I originally wanted to be. And it's I'm on the other end. So it's kind of an interesting twist.
Yeah. So you did kind of end up where you thought you'd be, but just in a different position.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's really cool. So tell us a little bit about what a day in your life looks like as the PR manager for Bath & Body Works.
Yeah, so it's very busy, and we're working on all seasons at the same time, which can be a little crazy, but it's also super fun. You're working on the current products that are out, but then you're also thinking ahead to what's going to happen for Christmas or, next spring, what do we want to bring to the table? And so it keeps you on your toes and makes you think in different ways, throughout your day, you put on different hats, in the morning versus by the afternoon, you're thinking about an entire different time of year. And it's also just really cross-functional. So one reason I even went from agency to in-house is I wanted that network of people that all work for the same company, and they all have the same goals, and you're just working with them at that deeper level. And I can say I definitely have that at Bath & Body Works. So it's I'm on the PR team, but I work with marketing and social media and digital advertising and even community relations and philanthropy. And I mean, the list goes on and on. I feel like I can touch so many areas of the business. And through that, I also just like learn a ton. I'm always learning.
That's awesome. I think that's when you know that the work you do is like challenging, is when you're always doing new things where you feel like you're constantly learning instead of, doing the same things every single day that you've already done.
Yeah.
One question I always thought this in movies, when you like watch a Christmas episode and you like know that they filmed it probably in like summer. Is it weird when you're thinking about like the new products that like Bath and Body, like it's August, it's like 100 degrees out. Is it hard to like transition to think of like what people are even going to want in Christmas of next year?
It can be, yeah. And sometimes I get confused on like what day it is because I'm just thinking of all these other time frames. But at the same time, it's like transportive, like sometimes, it's 100 degrees out, it's August, but you're thinking about Christmas and you like start to get that seed of excitement. You're like, oh my gosh, it's coming. And it's such a good time of year. Or even like, it's in spring, but you're waiting for summer. You just want to have that like beach vibe, and you kind of can have it a little bit early when you're working on projects in different seasons. So
I love that.
yeah.
I want to go back and touch on that storytelling piece that you mentioned briefly. And I know even in your LinkedIn bio, it says that you are really passionate and you believe that creative storytelling and relationship building are key to growing and maintaining a successful brand. Can you elaborate a little bit more about why storytelling is so important?
Yeah, I think stories connect people, and it's just, it makes something intangible more tangible and more relatable. So, to me, it's like not just about a newsworthy moment, which is what PR typically gets bucketed as, is like, oh, you have news to share. But like it's finding those little stories in between those moments that to me are most impactful, because it makes a brand more relatable. And it's like, putting a face to the name or making it more personal. And there's just, so many people who work for the brand, so many customers interacting with it every day, that there's bound to be these like hidden gems that you can find them. Like people are really interested in hearing about them. Even like, in a store last year, there was like someone proposed in a Bath and Body Works store with one of our fragrances, and
Oh my
like it was a
gosh.
romance fragrance, but like, he got on one knee, and they both were huge Bath and Body Works fans. And I'm just like, that's so special and cool. And, people aren't going to know about it unless you kind of share that and spread the message.
I like the idea of that it humanizes the brain when you share these personal stories of customers that like they love Bath and Body Works so much that they're going to propose like in the Bath and Body Works store. That is like the epitome of brand affinity. And so like getting to share that is a good way of you just being like, not, oh, buy Bath and Body Works, Bath and Body Works is great, but like here's a story of people who love it and how it's evolved in their lives.
Yeah. It also, that brings me to an example from like my agency days too. I worked with this airline, and they really wanted to always push stories related to the services, like, oh, buy tickets for this flight. And for me, it was like people are more interested in like the travel memories that are made like using the service versus just like the basic info on like how much a ticket costs. And like one day I was there at the airline, and I saw the pilot bringing his dog like on the plane with him. And I was like, oh my gosh, like tell me more about this. Like, do you bring your dog all the time? And he said, we do like trips all over the nation and even the world. And he's my little pilot dog. And I was like, this is amazing. So I kind of interviewed him myself, like took some quotes and some story nuggets, and even some photos and videos. I had him send me pictures of like him and the dog in Colorado in the snow, and then like on the beaches in the Bahamas. And it actually landed a piece like on Good Morning America, which was huge because they were just a small little brand
That's
getting like national
incredible.
exposure. Yeah.
Wow. All through a story, not through paid ads or anything like that, through just having people organically talk about the brand in a positive way.
Yep, exactly.
Uh,
It really is. It's such a fun way to think about it.
yeah, which I feel like is what makes PR so cool. Because I think and the marketing side, sometimes I can feel like it's that, whoever spends the most makes the most. But I think what is cool about PR is that if you just like capture a really cool moment like that, you can get everyone talking about your brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing I want to go into a little bit is the difference between in-house and agency. So you touched that you've done both. You did the agency, and then now you're back at in-house. So this is, I feel like, something that people struggle with a lot within PR and marketing, of whether or not to go agency or in-house. What advice can you give to someone who's struggling between the two?
Yeah, so I personally am so happy that I went agency first, but it's definitely not for everyone. So I like to caveat that because it's really important that you think about what you want out of your first, real job, and you're going to be spending a lot of time doing it. So it's an important choice. So to me, like agency was amazing to get as much experience as quickly as possible because you get thrown into a ton of different industries, different clients, different personality types. And then a lot of the time agencies offer like a ton of services. So we were considered full service and had like at all the different areas of PR you can think of. So even more than just the storytelling, media relations, but also like events, awards, speaking engagements, anything that can get the brand out in front of the public in a really positive way. So I always call it like my little PR boot camp because
Aw,
it's like, yeah, it's like, it is really hard. It's very fast paced. You're challenged in like ways you can't even imagine sometimes, but at the same time, you walk away from it just so much stronger in your profession. And just, I think you make a great relationship network like along the way too. But saying it isn't for everyone, like it is so fast paced that sometimes, people will join an agency, and I saw it happen at mine, and not necessarily be fully prepared for it or not have like the personality for it. And then, feel like they need to look for new opportunities. And then I always feel bad because it's like, it's not PR that's the problem. It's just the environment. Like you need to find the company that you're going to fit best with, the team you're going to fit best with. And so, I always think it's a blessing in disguise too, because I've seen some of those people who left the agency go and do like their dream job, like right afterwards. So it's kind of, like I said, sitting down and figuring out what you want.
Is it quick question on that? Is this
Yeah.
a myth or true that you get paid a lot less in agency than you would in-house?
Yeah, I think that's true. So it's sad because I think you work really, really hard and longer hours and typically don't get paid as well. But then I also think it's kind of a reality that people, move on from agency to in-house like inevitably. And then that's where you can, maybe grow your career, earn a little bit more doing it. And like all of that effort you put in the beginning is just like this really strong foundation. And it also kind of helps you like test and learn like what industries do I like? Because like
Yeah,
I
it's a
worked
good
with
point.
tech clients, I worked with airline clients, I worked with like construction companies, and then I worked with like really fun lifestyle clients in beauty and restaurants. And that's when I was like, this is my passion. Like this is what I want to do. And now obviously working at Bath and Body Works, it's like I stuck with that like lifestyle industry. So I don't think I would have known that necessarily if I hadn't tried like all the different areas first.
What made you eventually decide to leave agency and go in-house?
Yeah, I just kind of, I think the whole last year I was there was ready to go in house, and I wanted that feeling of like getting behind one brand, one purpose, and kind of what I mentioned earlier too, having that like collaboration that's all toward one shared goal or project. Because when you're at an agency, everyone's kind of like working on multiple projects at once, so there's not that same level of like shared commitment and focus. And I think a piece of advice to even layer in is that I wasn't willing to settle. Like I was like, if I'm going to leave this agency, I want to go to a job that feels like my dream job or something I really, really want to do. And so like it took so many interviews, like basically an entire year's worth of job seeking and interviews to like finally find the perfect fit that like not only was I excited about, but could also extend the offer. So yeah, I think it was definitely worth the wait to just put in that time and wait till the perfect thing kind of falls in your lap.
How did you know when it was the right job? Like, how did you get a feeling, or what kind of told you that this is the job I'm supposed to take?
Yeah, I think the industry itself was like already a perfect fit. I'm already a brand fan of Bath and Body Works. Like I grew up going to the stores and shopping their products and everything. So that helps with a passion element. And then, meeting the team as you continue to have different interviews in the process, and you're getting to like, have those conversations with people you might interact with every day. You kind of just get that feeling of like culture and the different styles that they might have in their working environment and if it's going to fit with yours. So I really felt like by the end of my interview, all of my interviews, I was like, this feels like a really good place for me and a place I would get along with everyone.
Yeah. I think it's important to have that feeling because sometimes you could just be eager to take a job that was just going to pay you the most instead of waiting and holding out for a company that you feel like aligns with your values too. So I'm really glad that you were able to find that.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
But you've been in PR for over 7 years now, which is insane and amazing. So what is something that college didn't teach you about PR that you really, really wish that they did?
I think it's funny when you first start in PR, you're usually in that like coordinator type of position or like specialist. And I think I was ready to like jump into my career. I was like, okay, you get the piece of paper that says you learned it, and then you just jump in and you're doing the glitz and the glam of PR. You're working with journalists, you're throwing events. And I think there's kind of that reality filter of like, I kind of wish college had said, at first you're probably going to be making media lists, which are like you're pulling contacts into an Excel sheet. And you're probably going to be like, looking at the metrics of like how well something performed and just helping with some of those like maybe not so glamorous things. But what I learned quickly is that all of those things are so pivotal to the success of a client or a brand that it's like you're the backbone of the team. And so once I kind of reframed my mindset of like everything I do, even though it feels maybe less glamorous, is super meaningful and it's helping my team, it's making a difference. And now that's kind of continued, I feel like throughout my career, that no matter what level you're at in your career, like those fundamentals are always going to be a super important part of what you do. So yeah, I kind of wish they had warned me, but at the same time, I learned a lot along the way. So.
Yeah, and it can feel like you're like, is this even the right job for me? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I being taken advantage of? But sometimes it's also really good that you've done those things. So now when you're in a position like how you are, when you're in a much, higher up role, you can also understand better of like who's making the media list if I'm the one using them, and that you've done that work, and so you can understand it a lot better.
Yeah, it definitely helps with training and like mentoring your team. Like you just mentioned, it's like someone else is stepping into that role. So you're way better equipped to help them grow. And honestly, that's part of being a manager that it's one of the parts that's my favorite, is being able to help mentor other people and grow my teams. And at the agency, I had by the time I left a couple of teams that I helped lead. And to me, that was like the most rewarding part is like at the end of the day, being able to promote someone or like, go out to happy hour with them and like celebrate a huge win that we got for a client and like all be together. So.
So like you have this awesome job, and you're in this industry that I think a lot of people want to be in. What advice would you give to someone who's like, oh my gosh, I would love to have Kaleigh's job someday? What could they be doing now to like start preparing, whether they're just out of college or maybe they're in a different industry and they want to switch into PR? How can they make themselves a better applicant for a PR role?
Yeah, I think interning and like experimenting with different, even like projects that can help expose you to different things makes you way more marketable to say like, you have this well-rounded type of experience or, transferable skills too. So like communication, it happens in so many different jobs. And if you can find those areas of communication that easily translate to PR. So for example, storytelling, if you can really hone in on those areas, like in an interview or on your resume, I think it really boosts you up to the top of the list because it kind of shows that one, you totally understand like the type of job you're going for and what's going to best connect with it. But then also that, you've kind of started to work on those skills they're going to make it a success.
Yeah. And I think even if like those transferable skills are important, if maybe you don't have direct communication experience, but would it be similar if they just like highlight a communication experience they have in a different type of role?
Yeah, I think so because, at the end of the day, if you are a good writer or, you're good at understanding different voices, like different types of customers or like some are going to sound more corporate, some are going to sound more fun. Like that was something I had to learn even from agency to Bath and Body Works, is like the tonality of how I write. But I think, there's so many jobs that you start to train those skills. It doesn't have to be PR specifically.
Yes. And what you mentioned there is really important too, of tonality is what you called it. But I'm sure at the agency you had to switch constantly. The way you wrote for an airline company was probably so much different than you wrote for a lifestyle company. So even be able to switch really quickly is probably a skill that would be really helpful in an agency role. And not that your voice is constantly going to change.
Yeah, it really is. And I think also just being able to network or have like relationships. I know there's been so many interviews that have kind of asked, like, going into the media world, like what relationships do you already have that you feel like could help, bring you into this industry. And so even if it's not like journalists that you already have a connection with, it could be, mentors who have done PR, like the one I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, like any type of connection point that kind of is like, I'm feeling committed to this industry and I already have a jump start into making it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that vein of interviewing, a lot of our listeners may actively be on the job hunt. What interviewing tips can you share with them?
Yeah, I think preparing is like an obvious, but at the same time, I feel like it can be overlooked, especially with like specific types of questions that you might not see coming. It's like you might focus so much on what skills do I have? Like what examples are they going to ask me about, like from past experiences, that you might overlook something as simple as like, why do you want to work for us? And like you need to have a good answer to even those more just like personal connection questions. And, when Bath and Body Works asked like, why us, I had a whole list of reasons of why I would want to work for them specifically. So I think it's really important to sit down and prepare for all the different types of questions you might get. And that way you feel like going into it, with a good mindset. But I also think tailoring it to, if you are going for an agency, or if you are going in-house, like I think you might approach those interviews a little bit differently. So like with agency, stressing on things more like your organization, because you're going to be working with like tons of accounts and need to be like super organized all the time. Or your time management, your stress management, things like that, I feel like are really relatable to an agency. And then for in-house, it might be more about like that like loyalty, that brand passion, collaboration, because I mentioned, you're working with tons of different teams and like cross-functional. So even thinking about like little twists that you might make in your conversation based off of like who you're interviewing with, I think could go a really long way.
That is so important. And especially that thing you highlighted of like, why do you want to work for us? And making that so personalized and not just like, well, I love like beauty and what I bought a kettle from Bath and Body Works once or something, but being able to like specifically share it, even for you, maybe you did share like your childhood memories of going shopping at Bath and Body Works, and if you can connect way more, because most people like don't spend enough time preparing to be able to answer a question like that authentically.
And I think like the what do you already know about us question I've heard so many times, and it's like hopefully you did your research on the companies to be able to answer it, but even for me, it's caught me off guard a couple of times with like, wow, like what do I know about, especially if it's not like as mega brand as Bath and Body Works, like there's intricacies like you might not know, or even like what news have they been in recently if you're going for a PR position, because the recent media is going to inform like what future media you might be able to get. And it's a good conversation starter too. So like, even if they don't overtly ask you those questions, like you can find a way to kind of bring them up to show like, hey, I've been educated on this. I've done my research and prepared myself for this meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. What are can you share any other questions that are ones that you see asked a lot? So you mentioned, why do you want to work for us? What do you already know about us? Are there any other ones?
I think like how you want to progress at the company, like that kind of 5-year type of question. It can show up in different ways. So it's not always like, what's your 5-year plan? But like a million different phrases that kind of give the same sentiment. And I think it's important because, especially starting your career, you might be really focused on like, what can I do right now to get started, but like lose sight of like future planning too. And so it's like, you might not know exactly what you want over the course of the next few years, but having like even a general idea of like, I want to learn new skills, or I want to grow a team. I want to start managing people. I want to innovate or be a part of a company that's innovating like brand new things. I think having an answer to that is also like something I've heard quite a few times.
Those are great. Yeah. Cause that's another one I get asked a lot is like, what questions can you get asked in an interview? And there's like an infinite amount of questions you could possibly get asked. And I think those are good ones
Yeah,
that people can practice.
definitely.
Is there any last piece of advice that you'd like to give to women in marketing or PR?
I think, just starting out, absorbing everything you can, like coming from the agency, that was like my number one goal was like, there's so many things happening all at once. Like, how can I just absorb all of this and like really learn and have takeaways so that I'm growing from all of it? But then also like not being scared to manage up and share ideas because even in my first year, I can remember back to like brainstorms where I was kind of like on the edge of like, should I say something? I have this idea. And then those times I would just say it. Like, I always felt so good, even if the reaction was kind of like, oh, like that's not the best fit for this campaign because XYZ. And then it's like a learning moment. Or those times where like it paid off and people like loved your idea and did something with it. It's like, it gives you a lot of confidence going forward in your career. And like, as those experiences build over time and like more of them go well, I think, that's when you kind of, yeah.
I think that's such good advice. And I can absolutely relate to being too quiet to want to share an idea, or if you share it and it gets turned down, so you feel scared to like share another idea later on. But no one, especially if you're new, no one's expecting you to come up with like the $1 million idea that's going to solve the problem that everyone above you can't. And so I think what you said, you either, your idea gets heard and it gets done, or it turns into a learning moment. So if you look at it that way, then it's a win-win either way.
Yeah. And I think too, it's easy to tell yourself stories. So that's another big piece of advice, even like my dad gave me when I was starting my career. And I remember like calling him one day and being like, oh, I just had the worst, week at work. And like, here's what's happening. And he was like, is that like really what's happening? Or is that the story you're telling yourself? Like you're getting down on yourself about some mistakes you made, but does that mean that your manager thinks you're terrible? Like, did she say that? Or is that a story you're telling yourself? And like taking a step back and like listening to him, I was like, you're right. Like I had an off week, but like no one said I was doing a bad job or like that they were worried about my performance or like anything that was a red flag. And so it kind of just shows like it's easy to think about the negatives. And if you can just reframe to the positives or like investigate and be curious a little bit more about like the reality of what's happening, it can be a lot more positive of an experience and like help grow you.
That's such a good point. Yeah, the stories we tell ourselves are often quite different than reality. Well, Kaleigh, this has been such an incredible conversation. Where can our audience find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Kaleigh DeHart. So definitely feel free to connect with me or send me a message. And I'm always down for like a coffee chat or if people want to, just network a little bit. So yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast today. I had such a great time chatting with you.
Me too. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and hopefully your listeners can learn a little bit and, follow their dreams with this advice.